Hi guys, my name is Kirsty and welcome back to Upside Down Books. Today we're going to be doing a book tag because I've forgotten how much I love these. So, first of all, if it's a little bit dark, which I feel it is, I apologize, but we've also just lost all of our power, so I can't do anything to make anything lighter at the moment, so we're just gonna have to deal with the slightly strange lighting. So today I'm gonna be doing the Brandy Sandy book tag, which was created by Beckle Panda. I will leave a link above below to her original video because she is awesome, and she's also an Australian vlogger, so make sure that you go over and check out her channel. This is an original book tag by her, which I'm actually really excited about. Beck really loves her Brandon Sanderson. She doesn't stop talking about it in her videos, so I thought that this was a really great tag to do, and I'm feeling it. Now, if you've seen the original, then you know, but I will remind you, for those who haven't seen the original, that there are no spoilers for Brandon Sanderson books in this tag and any of the questions, and you don't need to have read the books for it to make sense, which is great because I have personally not read any Brandon Sanderson, but we'll get back into that in a second. So there are 10 questions and I'm just going to work my way through them. Let's go. So the first question is Way of Kings. What's a hyped up book or series that you've been meaning to get to but you just haven't? So I think it is only fair that my pick for that is actually Brandon Sanderson's The Final Empire series. So I have owned this first book for the longest of times because it is one of the most hyped series out there in the fantasy world, but I've just not got around to reading it because of its size. That is all this is about. It is just such a big book and I am absolutely terrified to read it. So one day I hope to read this and I'm sure I will love it when I get to it, but I just get so put off by how long this series is. So shame on me, and I'm sorry Beck if you're watching this that I have not read this series yet. The next question is Mistborn. Name a book with a magic system in it that you really loved. Now I actually kept drawing a blank on this because I couldn't think of anything apart from A Court of Thorns and Roses and Harry Potter that had magic, but when I asked my brother what he thought, we both realized at the same time that the Summoner trilogy by Taran Matharu, I don't know how to say his name, has an amazing magic system in it. Also has an amazing like color scheme going for the covers, which I really love, but this is a really fantastic magical series that uses runes and has a very sort of epic fantasy vibe going for it, with some great high fantasy elements in it, I feel, as well when it comes to the magic system. So this is a really fun, adventurous, magical series that I would recommend. However, I have only read book 1, so I at some point do need to continue the series and read book 2, 3, and I think 4 is out as well now, but I have yet to get there. I actually read an advanced copy of book 1, so it's been a really long time since I read the series, but this has a great magic system to it, and I feel like the whole series is getting quite popular lately, so if you haven't jumped on this bandwagon yet, then I recommend that you do. The next question is work in progress. Sanderson has a progress bar on his website telling us what stages of his books he's written the drafts for. So what is a series in progress that you're super pumped to read the next book or conclusion for? And this was a no-brainer for me. To this day, Victoria Scott has not finished the Fire and Flood trilogy, and I'm very upset about this. And I also feel really guilty because I recommended this to my sister, and then when she finished book 2, I told her that book 3 was not out yet. I was under the impression that Scott was still writing this and was actually on the road to getting book 3 up and coming and ready to go, but just nothing has happened. It has been years, which is really upsetting. So this is about a competition in a dystopian world, and everybody in the competition has a loved one who has a fatal illness, whether it's cancer or something else, and they are competing for the cure. So they have like all these different terrains and challenges to get through and race to the finish. And whoever gets there first is the one that wins the cure. So it's some really great motivations going on and some really interesting settings, but I don't know if we're ever going to get the ending to find out what happens. I need to know what happens because it ends on a wicked cliffhanger. So I'm really upset that Scott hasn't finished that yet, but I am so hoping that one day, we'll get the 3rd book in this series. The next question is Skyward. Spensa is stubborn but grows so much over one book. Name a book or series with a character that you adore the growth of. Now, the first thing that came to mind for this one was actually The Song of the Lioness Quartet by Tamora Pierce. I have just finished reading book 3, so I've just got one more book to go in this series now, and I've been really impressed by how much the main character, Alana, grows in this series. I find this really fascinating because I think Tamora actually wrote this back in the 80s, so this is quite an old series now, but it's so relevant to today still. There's some really great themes for female empowerment, especially with Alana being a female knight in this book, so if you haven't read this yet, I would recommend that you do. It starts off as children's fiction, but it's like edging into young adult as the books go on. Definitely by book 3 we have more themes of like sex and stuff like that happening, so it is more at all, and that's what I mean. Like, the book grows up as you read it, and so does Alana, and I think that this is a really great example of character development and growth done extremely well. The next question is, alloy of lore, name a book or series whose world you'd like to revisit, whether in a prequel or a continuation. Now, I'm kind of cheating with my answer for this one because I already have the book that I want, and that is Tiger's Dream by Colleen Houck, but I feel the need to talk about it because it's my favourite series in the whole wide world. I waited for this book for such a long time. This is the 5th book that I never thought would happen, well, in the Tiger's Curse saga. So we had originally 4 books. It was the series that got me into reading. I love all of Houck's books. They're always phenomenal, and I don't understand why there's less hype over her latest books because she's just incredible. But I didn't even realize that there was specifically a need for a 5th book because the 4th book finishes quite nicely. But look at this beast. Colleen Houck worked so hard to get a publishing deal picked up for this one. I think she had always intended for there to be a 5th book, but she only signed a 4-book deal to start with Hodder and Stoughton. So I'm really excited that they did actually publish the 5th one. Thank you so much to the book gods for doing that because I'm so excited to find out what happens. This is following Kishan's story, so if you've read the series then you may recall how Kishan's story ends. He is Ren's brother. So I'm really excited to explore this story because Kishan is amazing, I love him, and he definitely deserves such a massive book. The next question is, White Sand, do you read graphic novels? And if you do, mention your current favourite. If you don't, is there one you'd like to try? I do read graphic novels, but not that many. But my favourite is definitely Mouse by Art Spiegelman. Art Spiegelman is a very intellectual guy. He is written in the New York Review of Books and has lots of interesting opinions on things, and this is just a great work of art. This is actually based on sort of a true story. It is based on a true story. He's interviewed his grandfather or father, I think it's his grandfather, and written this graphic novel based on his experience of living as a Jew through World War II and the Holocaust and all of the shit that comes with that. So this is a black and white graphic novel where it depicts different ethnicities and races as different animals. So the Jews are mice, the Nazis are cats, the Poles are pigs, I believe, and so on and so forth. So it plays with a lot of visual stereotypes and imagery and is really, really fantastic. This is actually a bind-up of the first 2 installments of it. There are only 2 installments of it as far as I know, but yeah, oh my gosh. This is definitely my favourite graphic novel, would recommend if you have not read it. The next question is Legion. Sanderson writes science fiction as well as fantasy. What's a book outside your favourite genre that you really enjoyed? Now, my favourite genres are probably fantasy and historical fiction, and I very, very rarely step out of those genres, with the exception of sci-fi, but that's probably my 3rd favourite, so I'm not counting that as stepping outside my comfort zone. However, things that have been outside my comfort zone would be general fiction, romance, urban fantasy specifically I don't read a lot of, paranormal fantasy I don't tend to pick up much, but the one that I'm picking for you today is classics because I always avoid reading classics. It's just not something I particularly enjoy. I find them dry, I find them difficult, I have had multiple bad experiences with it. Pride and Prejudice was boring to read, and I managed to miss the part where Darcy proposes to Elizabeth because the way it's written was so confusing. I found Jane Eyre really difficult to get through, though I did enjoy it in the end, and on the whole I'm terrified to pick up any more classics. Why are they always so long? But that being said, one of my favourite books is Frankenstein, so it's just all in or all out apparently. But Frankenstein is actually one of my most reread books, which is something that's really unusual for me. I don't tend to reread books ever because I feel like it's a waste of time when I'm not the kind of person who reads 20 books per month. Sometimes I read 2 or 3, so I don't have time to reread. There's so many other books I've got to get through. But Frankenstein I love to reread at Halloween. I haven't done it for a couple of years now, but I've reread this about 3 times. I first was introduced to this book when I studied it in my final year of high school, and I loved it. I had really low expectations because quite a few other people had read it before I got to it in class and said how boring it is, because Frankenstein starts off with a series of letters sort of prefacing the whole story that is to come about Frankenstein's monster, and they're really dry and quite boring, especially if you don't really understand what the story of Frankenstein is. Not to mention there's a really lengthy story about how the monster learns to speak, and there's lots of really slow parts in this book, despite the fact it's quite short. But yeah, this is probably the greatest exemplar that I have of a book that I adored that is really outside of my comfort zone. The next question is Catalogue. It is not a secret that Sanderson has written an intimidating amount of books. Name an intimidating book on your to-be-read pile. Now, I think until the day that I finally read this book, this will always be my answer, and that is Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay. I have always wanted to get into Guy Gavriel Kay's writing, but look how big this book is. This spine is already curved just from not even being opened. I have never read this book or attempted to. It's just from sitting on my shelf. It is so big, it's just curving its own spine by existing. Now, I don't actually remember if this is fantasy or like historical fiction, but it is fiction. Also, side note, if you can hear the kids screaming, I apologize. That's my neighbors. They are incredibly noisy always, but hopefully the microphone isn't picking up their really loud screaming. Anyway, back to Kay. I hope to read this one day. I think I'm going to really enjoy this. This sounds like it's got some amazing world building, and I love extensive world building. I think I just need someone to tell me that they've read it and they loved it and that it's worth it, but this book intimidates the heck out of me. I would sooner pick up Vanity Fair or David Copperfield before I dive into this monstrosity of a book. Next question is Elantris. Standalone. Name a standalone that you loved and would recommend. So the book I want to talk about is one that nobody ever talks about and needs to be talked about more, and that is The Lantern's Ember by Colleen Houck. My love, my life, and my god. I love Colleen Houck, and this came out especially for Halloween maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it's really good, guys. This is sort of a reimagining, retelling of the Jack-o'-lantern story. What are those called? Like Jack Skellington sort of. Not even that. I don't know. It's playing on a lot of paranormal creatures that come out to play around Halloween time. So if you love Halloween, why the heck haven't you read this book yet? I don't know why this isn't more popular. This is a really fun sort of fantasy, romance, adventure story filled with paranormal creatures that we just don't see in any other paranormal books because it's always vampires, werewolves, or all the boring vanilla stuff. This has all the exciting stuff that comes out to play at the spookiest time of the year. So this is fantastic. It's got a gorgeous cover and it is just a standalone. So it's just a done and dusted single hit story that I can't recommend enough. And that brings us to the final question, which is a recommendation. The question is basically to just recommend a book that you want more people to read. Now, this is already quite a popular book, but I want to talk about it more because I really enjoy it, and I don't think, despite the large number of people already reading this series, I don't think enough people are reading it, and that is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. And as a footnote, would like to say all of his other books too, because Dry was amazing, but Scythe is like Scythe is so close to just being like an international phenomenon, and it's just not quite there yet, I don't feel. Not enough people are as excited about it as I am. This should be as big and as exciting as anything that Sarah J. Maas writes, in my opinion. Scythe is an incredible author who writes incredible characters with really unique and imaginative stories, and this is just incredible. This has been blurbed by Maggie Stiefvater. She thinks it's amazing too. But this is all in a futuristic dystopic world where people don't die anymore, where people have conquered death, which means that they have to have scythes who basically manage the population, and they choose and have a quota of people to kill over a period of time. And it's awesome and amazing. And this series sucks you in. I've read book 1 and book 2. I got book 3 at Christmas of last year, so I have been waiting to fit that into my schedule. It's like 3 times the size of this one. It's massive. But this series is phenomenal. So if you haven't read this yet, guys, I implore you, please pick this series up. You will thank me for it later. So that brings me to the end of this tag today. I had a really great amount of fun answering all these questions and recommending all these books to you and talking about how scary some of these books are. So thank you very much to Beck for coming up with this tag. I thought that was really fun. I am going to tag Steph over at Novelty Corner, which I don't think you've done this tag yet, but I think that you should, and I'd like to see your answers, and anyone else who wants to give this a go. But I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.